ready, Josh?
All right. Hi, everyone. Oh, we have echo. Hold on. Oh, okay. We're good now. All right. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all for our budget meeting. So we don't call it to order like our normal meetings and do quorum counts and attendance. So just wanted to remind everybody why I'm not doing that this evening. But I will let folk know that Judah is online. He is present. So if we might need to check and see if he has questions or comments at some point too. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ryan.
All right. Can I borrow yours? Is this okay? Got it. So we wanted to start with introductions. So if it's okay, we'll start with Shauna. Just who you are and number of years either as a budget committee member or a board member.
All right. I'm Shauna Tomini, she, her, and I serve alongside Teresa as co-vice chair of the school board. I've been on the board now this is my 4th year. And I have been on the budget committee as part of that work as a board member, and the year before that served on the budget committee as a community member.
Hi, I'm Jessie Munster, and this is my first time, and I'm on the budget committee, and I'm happy to be here.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Bernie Wong, and this is my first time doing the budget committee, and also I'm about 6 months in on the school board, so all of this is still pretty new.
My name is Meredith Bailey, and I'm a brand new member, so we'll see.
My name is Sami Aladrabo, and I'm frantically searching. Is it true I've been on the budget committee since 2015? So it's 10 years. I think it is. So on the budget committee, I think since 2015.
Yeah.
And on the school board since 2017. Yeah, it feels a lot.
Hi, I'm Chris Hawkins. I'm on the school board and have been this is my 2nd year.
Kevin Riley, this is my first time on the budget committee. Community member.
Lou Whitebear. I go by Lou, just for folk who don't know me. And I've been on the school board since 2020. Yes, 2020. And I'm the chair of the school board.
And I'm Ryan Oss. I serve as the superintendent of the district, and I am in year 9.
Andrew Freeborg, he, him. This is, I think, my 5th year on the budget committee. I think I started in 2021.
My name is Lauren Wolf. I'm the director of finance for the district. This is my 2nd budget with the district. I think it's my 5th budget that I have prepared. I was also on a budget committee in another community and also on a school board in another community, so I did budget from your perspective as well. And I don't know how many that total adds up to. So
I'm Cassie Inman. I'm a community member of the budget committee, and this is my first time.
I'm Therese Jones. I'm, along with Shauna, the co-vice chair for the school board. I've been on the school board since 2017.
Excuse me, Tony Vandermeer, community member on the budget committee, and this is my 2nd year.
Hi, everyone. Melissa Harder. I'm the assistant superintendent here in the Corvallis School District, and I'm finishing my year 6.
Kim Nelson. I am the board secretary. This is my 1st year on budget.
thank you, Kim.
Judah, do you want to introduce yourself online?
Judah Largent, he, him pronouns. I'm on the school board in my 2nd year, and this is also my 2nd time on the budget committee. Thank you.
Were you all able to hear that okay? Okay, great. And Jan, do you want to introduce yourself and number of years that you've been on the budget committee?
Okay. My name is Yan Wang. I'm the budget committee member. This is my first term to serve the community. Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
I just wanted to say welcome to everybody that's new. It's really great to see you step into these roles, and I just wanted to say thank you really quick before we got started. It means a lot for you to work with us in this capacity.
And I also wanted to thank you for your service. I'll thank you now, and I will also thank you at the completion of your service for your willingness to participate in this way. And tonight is really something that we started with our last business manager, but it's just an opportunity to do some information sharing and some better understanding of the process itself that we're going to undertake at our first official budget committee meeting, which is the next scheduled time for us to be together. And so we decided, I think 5 or 6 years ago, that it would be a good idea to have a pre-meeting, more or less. And again, it's just intended to provide new budget committee members new information, and those that are returning and board members reminders about the process and as we move into it. And so again, tonight's a little less formal in that regard, but also I think it's as important as any of the other meetings that we hold, because it helps us to set the expectations and the understanding that we'll need to maintain as we move through the process. So with that, my other responsibility tonight is just to review our meeting norms. So if you wouldn't mind shifting to those. So there's a few things that are important. Focusing on the use of the meeting time together. We know that you all lead busy lives, all 14 of you as budget committee members and board members. And so to make sure that we use our time wisely, we get the questions asked that would need to be asked, but we also move together in a fashion that allows us to get the work done and accomplished. Along those lines, orderly procedure, and so the next upcoming meetings will function more like board meetings in that regard than tonight. One of the things that I think is important to note is the third bullet, and that's just the consideration of district staff capacity and resource. I would like to share that Lauren has been working not just in preparation of the budget itself that is still being developed, but also in terms of trying to get feedback to the number of questions that we've been asked. And I think that we have taken another step this year in trying to provide additional information to the community on the front end and being able to respond to many of those questions. And so you'll see that tonight, and also some more information that will come to you tomorrow. So as you think about the requests that you make of staff time coming out of these meetings, just being cognizant of that. And then finally, respectful deliberation and conversation. And that I think is important to say, but oftentimes what we live up to in this room. And so I think it's an important norm for us to continue to maintain, but I have no doubt that we'll be able to do that. So with that, I believe it's Lauren's turn to take over.
Okay, thanks everybody for being here. And like Ryan and Lou mentioned, this is a more informal meeting, so I don't mind if you have questions throughout. If we just address them as they come up, there will also be space for that at the end. So we'll start off with just some general budget information. I know this is very small, but I wanted to remind you again of the process, that this is a legal process that is required by the state of Oregon. And so this is sort of all of those different steps. And right now we are currently only in box 2, if you can believe that. We are at prepare, propose, budget. So myself and a few of my team have been working really hard to get that all pulled together for you, and we will have that to you shortly. But then there's a lot of other steps that have to happen, and a lot of actual timing pieces that we have to stick to. So we're trying to get to the end of the road, which will really, the main work is done by the committee by as soon as it is approved, so that either May 15th or 22nd, and then it goes to the board in June for adoption, and then after that we do all of the official filings with the counties, the states, our ESD, etc. So really it's a process that starts in December and will be concluded by July, and then we just start over. So for the budget committee roles and responsibilities, I think this is important, especially for our community members, because you may have other people that you connect with outside in the community that might not understand what a budget committee does. So I think these are some helpful talking points for you. So some key responsibilities are to hear the budget message, which Ryan will deliver, actually set. The levy amount is something that I calculate, but again, we have to pull in that levy amount to make payment on our outstanding debt for those bonds. So the committee does not set salaries, benefits, or contract terms. They do not set staffing levels or the organizational structure. They do not decide if a program or service should be funded. They do not make or alter district goals or policies. So those are really more on the operational side of business, and those actually 3 things aren't even school board parameter, like things in their parameters. So that just to be clear, when we get to that point, that's not something that the committee has control over. So what I wanted to do this year, a little bit different, but I wanted to, if we could, everybody should have a copy of the budget parameters. And since we did revise these this year, the school board did and adopted new budget parameters, I thought it would be helpful if we actually read them in full detail. So if Mrs. Harder, you want to start us off, and we'll just take turns reading each reading a section until we're done?
Absolutely. Corvallis School District budget parameters adopted by the school board on February 6, 2025. Budget parameters are general guidelines that the district intends to honor through its budget process. They set forth the ideals that the district's decision makers will adhere to as they develop the budget through an understanding that these decisions have long-term consequences. Budget parameters are important for creating a shared understanding of the overarching values that underpin budget development. Unlike the district's fiscal policies, which tend to be more technical, budget parameters can be understood and appreciated by all stakeholders, including the public.
Student outcomes should drive the budget process. The budget process should be driven by the vision to create exceptional learning experiences where all students learn at high levels. Clear goals for student outcomes should guide how resources are allocated, how progress is tracked, and how budget decisions are made to prioritize programs and strategies.
Provide every student with equitable access and opportunities. The district is committed to transforming educational systems to be diverse, equitable, and inclusionary in our decisions and actions, and create belonging for all students, staff, and families. The budget process should honor the rightful presence of identities and lived experiences so that every student belongs and feels safe and supported to thrive socially and academically. In order to achieve the educational equity for each and every student, the district shall make every effort to provide all students with equitable access to high-quality curriculum, support, facilities, and other resources, even when this means differentiating resource allocations.
Decisions should be informed by data. Decisions that impact the future of student learning should be centered on evidence of what works. Qualitative and quantitative data on student outcomes, both in terms of student achievements and overall student educational experience, should inform the decision-making process.
Base resourcing decisions on the total value created for students. The budget process should seek to allocate resources in a way that creates relevant and engaging learning experiences for students that support their short and long-term goals towards an evolving future.
Prioritize strategies and programs with proven cost effectiveness. Strategies and programs that have proven to produce larger gains and close the opportunity gap in learning for all student groups relative to their cost should be given priority for funding. Strategies and programs that are chosen should be implemented fully and faithfully, even if that means fewer strategies or programs are implemented.
Make student-centered decisions. Budget decisions should be based on what's best for students, not adults. In some cases, there is pressure to develop a budget that puts the interest of adult stakeholders above the interest of students. That priority should be reversed.
Critically re-examine patterns of spending. Past patterns of spending may no longer be relevant given changing needs of the community and student body. Hence, the budget process should encourage review of past spending decisions and critically change where necessary. The district should develop and implement a program review and sunset process to identify and discontinue programs that are not achieving their objectives or that are simply not as effective as available alternatives.
Take a long-term perspective. The district will not be able to make large changes to its educational strategy and resource allocation patterns within a single year. Further, a consistent application of proven strategies over a multi-year period will deliver better results. Therefore, to the degree possible, the district should develop and adhere to a multi-year funding plan for its strategies with the goal of fully funding and realigning resources where necessary to fund high priority elements of the strategies.
Engagement, transparency, and accountability. Effective budgeting requires valid information about the true costs of serving students and the outcomes produced for students.
Engage student and staff voice in the budget process, fostering identity and agency. Make performance data readily available. The budget process should be informed by valid and reliable data on fiscal and academic performance. Consider all direct and indirect expenditures in evaluating the costs of educating students. Use a consolidated budget that considers all available funds, acknowledge constraints on categorical spending, but consider all available funds to make the most impact with available resources. Be clear on what actions are being funded to help the district reach its board goals, not just line items and board expenditure categories.
Lauren, can I ask you a quick question? Where can people find a copy of this?
The budget parameters they're in board book when they were adopted, and I'm not sure if they're on our budget webs page or not, but I will double check, and if they're not, make sure that the new copy is up there.
Okay, just in case people wanted to
Yeah.
see what we just read.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have to take a minute to do a little bit of the boring stuff before we get into the more exciting stuff. So you will receive a budget document by the Friday before our meeting. So our meeting will be on a Thursday, so whatever that Friday is, and I don't know at the moment, but you'll receive it on that day. It will be shared with you electronically. But if you would like a printed out copy, if you actually let me know tonight, then we can have it ready for you for pickup that day. But when you get it, it's going to be a book that's a little less than 200 pages. So it's probably important to know like what the important sections are in there, because I don't necessarily expect that you would read every detail on every single page. So it is divided out into 4 sections. So the beginning, and I think is the most important, especially for any community that is watching, is that executive summary. So it'll include the superintendent's budget message and a narrative overview of the budget. It will include pieces of information that come from the 3 following sections. So it's a good summary, and it's the shortest of the sections, so that's why it's my favorite. Then the next one would be the organizational section. So it just has general information about the district, like demographic type information in our budget. It will include in that section the budget parameters, any of our fiscal policies that are relevant to the conversation, and talking about procedures and regulations and all of that. Still a lot of words. But then you get to the financial section, and that's where you get into all of the tables with lots of numbers. And so that will include information for all of our funds in various different formats. So there will be all funds combined, and then there will be the information split into smaller groups and broader categories as well. So there is some narrative in there, but that's really the meaty number part. If that is more your thing, that's where you will want to go. And then the last section is our informational section, which has all of the historical type of data in there. It shows resource allocations by FTE versus numbers. It has property tax information, and then other, you'll find like the student performance data in there and other pieces of information as well. So there's 4 distinct sections, and I think it would be good for you to look through the entire thing, but please know that you do not have to spend the entire week prior to that memorizing it. I will hit all of the high points in our meeting. Okay, one more real technical bit, and you don't have to understand this, but the real point is there is a method to the madness, and so we have an accounting structure that is required by the state of Oregon, and this is how we report all of the data to them. So that is how the budget is presented, that we have 5 main funds: our general fund, our special revenues fund, which is all of our grants, and those are the most important. We have a debt service fund, where we pay for our PERS bonds and then paying back that general obligation bond from 2018. We will not have any capital projects funds this year, but part of the requirement from the state is that we present 3 years worth of history. So you will see that fund represented in the document, but there's going to be, it'll just be zeros down the row or down the column for this year. And then our internal services funds, which are largely contain insurance information, because we have 2 bargaining groups that have reserve funds, and then we have another fund that is set up with the risk management fund. So there is a significant dollar amount held there, but it's generally a pass-through for our insurance premiums, so it looks like a larger budget item than really what it is as far as accessible funds. And then the next layer in the accounting is our function. So we roll those up into broad categories. So instruction, those are your teachers, your EAs that are in the classroom. We have support services. So that can be a wide variety of things. So that can be any of the district staff that are in this room, but also principals, MTSS, counselors, mental health therapists, a whole wide array of different services that fit within there. Even our custodial crew, they're all within that category. The 3,000 is community services. That's a pretty small category, but actually our food service program is all categorized as a community service program, so that is where that lies. 4,000 is our facilities acquisition and construction. There will be small amounts there, but again, since we're done with that bond project, that doesn't have much weight. 5,000s are our agency funds. We have transfers and debt service, 6,000 contingency, and then 7,000 unappropriated reserves. And then the next layer under that would then break those categories out further into salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies and materials, capital outlay, and then other objects, which there's not much in there, but it's sort of dues and fees when we have to pay, for the election. We'll use that as an example. School board election, we have fees that we pay to the county for that. And so those are some small items that are in that fund. Transfers are generally transfers between funds. And then other uses fits within the contingency and unappropriated reserve category. So you will see all those things. There's information in the document about what all those mean. And if you are not coming from an accounting background, it might look daunting, but I wouldn't, don't place too much weight on that. There'll be definitions through all the things, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask questions if you're just not sure what a specific category means. But okay. We are going to touch on some financial and enrollment information. Most of this is all repetitive from other meetings that we've had, so I don't want to spend too much time on it because obviously we will get into the details of that at our next meeting. I think it's important to know that our general fund is really where all of our base operations come from. And this is what that distribution looks like. We are going to have a general fund budget of just over $115 million. And this is what that breakdown looks like. And I wanted to give you some examples of the biggest categories. So our local funding, that is just property tax revenues, local option revenues, that's the biggest source there, and some interest earnings. In the intermediate category, very small, we receive some county funds there. And then the next biggest category, the light blue one, is our state, and that's our state school fund, as well as some other grants that are a part of that, such as high cost disability. And then federal, really small in general fund, but I don't want that to be misunderstood as that federal funding is not important, because we have the majority of our federal funding is actually in our special revenues funds. And so we'll talk about that in more detail at our next meeting. And then that green category is largely just our fund balance that we roll over from year to year. So that is the current projection for fund balance that we will be using in the budget. Okay, and since we are in a long session year and the state school fund is the biggest category of our state funding, I just wanted to touch base on that quickly. So that state school fund is a combination of state and local funds. So if we get more local funds, we get less state funds. And they put them together to come up with our allocation. So it includes property taxes, other county and state level grants, and a 70% reimbursement for transportation expenses. It's appropriated biannually by the Oregon legislature. So we don't know how much money we are going to get for next year, and we probably won't until, well, I think the next economic forecast is due on May 15th, which is when we have our budget. Our first meeting, and I will most definitely not be able to make any adjustments at that point. So if for some reason state funding comes in higher than what we think it's going to come in, that's great, and we will just do a supplemental budget down the road. Pretty much as soon as we publish the document, something changes, and so that's just kind of the game right now. Sure.
This comes up every time we're in the year of the legislative session, and it often feels awkward to adopt a budget when the legislature hasn't fully identified the funding that's coming to school districts. We typically know the number, and the number tends to hold steady, but it is often a conversation that this committee has. I just want you to know that that's typical and predictable, and has been that way since I've been doing budget or serving as the superintendent. So just know that in the legislative year, we are always making an adoption of a budget before the end of the session, and that's just because of the way things are calendared, and just to anticipate that.
So in our current year, we are estimating to get about $10,592 per weighted student. And again, we don't actually know what that number is going to be until next May when they rebalance the state school fund. So it's a very complicated process, but even though it's complicated, this is normal. So like Ryan said, it's not anything that stresses us out terribly at this point. Everything's progressing as we would expect. What I can tell you is that the allocation per student, per weighted student, has generally gone up between $350 and $500 per student. So, and that's in alignment with what we're seeing with our assumption for allocations, which I will show you. Okay, So our budget assumptions for this budget, we are using a state school fund allocation of $11.4 billion. Feel pretty confident with that number based on the fact that the governor's budget and the Ways and Means came out with the same number. And so that doesn't always happen. And so I think because they were fairly in alignment, that's a sign that that's hopefully where we will land. At this point, really our only concern is if it was to be less than that after that next economic forecast comes out. But we're going to stay positive, and we are going to use the $11.4 billion. We have, you want to say something?
And so that's another piece where typically the governor's budget is the baseline, and then the co-chairs of Ways and Means will come out with a higher budget, and that gives us a sense that that number is going to be higher than the governor's budget. That wasn't the case. They're consistently the same, which is one more piece of data we use to be able to say we think this will be our number.
So the next assumptions are all around our cost for people, which is our highest spending category. So we've applied step increases to all eligible employees. That's per the contract agreements. We've applied cost of living increases per the contract terms. So you can see those numbers listed above. We have increased PERS cost to align with the new rates. So PERS increased about 6% for both groups, which is pretty significant. And we applied $50 increase in insurance contribution to all eligible employee groups. So $50 for 12 months per employee. And then we applied a 2.6% CPI to the rest of the costs, and that's just based on data from our region, and we used a number from an average of the last 12 months. If you haven't noticed, things have been a bit volatile the last few months, and so using like any data other than a full year just is a bit concerning. So we went with 2.6 increase on all other costs. Okay, and I'm sure you've seen this before as well, but this shows our enrollment by school and grade for the 25-26 school year. We are projecting 5,661 students, which will be a decrease of 237 students from the current year. Largely that has to do with our graduating seniors this year and a new class of kinders coming in. So I mean, we've talked about it pretty extensively, but that birth rate data isn't looking super promising in the next few years as far as our kindergarten enrollment. Okay, this is my fun fact slide. So we were incorporated in 1957 as a school district, and at that time we had about 4,500 students. And where our enrollment is now is we're projected to basically head back to that enrollment that we had way back in 1957. So this is just showing that historical trend information, and this if you dive deeper into it, there's a whole bunch of things that have happened in our community in the 70s where the spike was, and there's a lot of different things that have happened over time, I think, that have impacted this, but this is really just to show that change over a long period of time. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is some community engagement that we've done and feedback that we received from our community. So we put out a 4-question survey called the Listening and Learning Survey. We solicited participation from staff, high school students, families, community members, and received 446 responses. We gathered input on the alignment of district spending to our board goals, prioritization of funding, reductions the district could make with the least negative impact to students and staff, and ideas to maintain and improve high quality learning through declining enrollment. So the first one, for resource alignment to goals, for goal 1, excellent learning experience, 78% of respondents responded very well aligned or somewhat aligned. And then for the goal, second goal, equitable systems, 91% responded very well aligned or somewhat aligned. Goal 3, relevant and engaging learning, 77% responded very well aligned or somewhat aligned. And goal 4, healthy communities, 87% responded very well aligned or somewhat aligned. And we will be posting the full report, which I think is about 13 pages, tomorrow on the website, and I will send you an email with the link so that you have it. But we're just highlighting a few things from that. So the top ranked priorities, there was a list of, I think, 20 or 25 different priorities, and respondents were allowed to select up to 5. So the number 1 priority was class size and classroom teachers. The second was career and technical education programs. So we have several of those throughout the district: automotives, culinary, health sciences, engineering, carpentry, digital arts and design, computer science, child development, and studio arts. The third was classroom and academic support, which is our educational assistants that are supporting in our classrooms. The fourth was elementary enrichment, music, PE, and art. And then the fifth was student support services, nursing, counseling, special education, MTSS, Dean. There's a whole list of those. And I am happy to report that we will be doing all of those things next year, and making sure that our funding is supporting these priorities. Yeah.
Thank you. So in the report, you said, so you had 400, how many? 440? 46. So you said these were the top 5. Does the report list all of the options that folks had to choose from? And then have you provided like a weighted score for like how many respondents of the 446 chose these particular ones? Is it broken down by number?
Yes,
Okay.
There's a graph, and it has all, it's a bar graph, and it has all of the priorities, and it has a scale, and it shows how many votes for each. Yeah, and because we had 446 respondents, and everyone could respond to that question up to 5 times, there's more than 446. It's going to add up to more than that because they could vote up to 5 times.
Right. And did you have a chance, I don't know that you did, but are the responses correlated to the population that was responding? So like if did a high school student identify themselves as a high school student, and are their answers indicated? High school students answered these things.
We do have
parents answered these things, etc.
We do have that data, and I intend to look at some more trends, like as far as who responded in what way. To be completely honest, I have not had the capacity to dig into it that far and separate out the responses by respondent, how they're identifying. So, and we also allowed people to identify themselves in many ways. So like, for example, I said that I am a parent of a student, and I'm also a staff member. So there's multiple ways that people could respond to that. But we do have the raw data, and we'll get into it further when we can. When you have a minute. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And just to clarify again, we will have a full report. I wanted to share that information here with you all, but we will be posting it tomorrow. So the last 2 questions about reductions, as well as how we can maintain and improve a high quality education, what we did is those were open or free response type questions. And so we took those responses and pulled out themes. And so the report then has every theme that came from those questions, and we packed were other logistical factors. Yellow is something that we can consider, but there are maybe some factors that would make that difficult. And then red is something that we just can't do. And maybe because it's not legal or just different things like that. So I think out of the whole report, we had one that was red, and the rest, a lot of the things we're already doing. And so there's additional information there, I think, that will be helpful for people. But feel free to, I would really appreciate if you would take the time to review it before our next meeting, because I think between that document and then the budget FAQ that we've posted, I think a lot of questions could be answered from reading that. And if there's gaps in the information that we've put out, I would love to know that so that we can do better next year. Okay. So the next piece of information is something that we've received, comments that we've received several times this year, is that the Corvallis School District is the highest administrative staffed in the state. We've heard this several times from several different people in several different ways. And so what I had promised to do was to gather information about that and then bring that information back to share with anybody who would like to read it. So I put together another report on that, which will also be shared tomorrow. There was a question in our budget FAQ specifically around that, and I hadn't had time to actually put the report together. So we will look at that now. So we did a district FTE comparison, and I forgot to put my list of districts on here, so I apologize about that, but it's on the full report that you will receive. I think I can do it.
I think you can.
Okay. So it is the districts that we use to compare ourselves to for bargaining. And the reason why we would choose those districts is because they have similar demographics, similar number of students, similar in having a local option levy. There's not enough, all of those groups don't. But okay, so Corvallis, that's us, I got that one, is one. We have, I can start at the bottom. We have Westland, Wilsonville, we have Sherwood, we have Lake Oswego, we have Greater Albany, McMinnville, Lincoln County, Lebanon, Redmond, Oregon City.
That's
the group, and
well
those
done.
are on the actual report that you will see tomorrow. I don't know why I missed that part. But so what I did was I went, I requested information from them all directly, and then a lot of times had to fill in the gaps. So what I did is then take all of that data and I kind of summarized it here. So we will walk through it left to right. So for total budget, the lowest comparator had 7.88 students per 1 FTE. The highest comparison had 10.43 students per FTE, and the average was around 9.23. So, and Corvallis, you can see on the blue line, that's all of our information there. So we have 8.37 students to total FTE. So, and then the budgeted dollar amount per student, and this data really is fascinating to look at if you look at districts with local option levies or not. But the budget per student, the lowest, had about $19,000 per student. The highest at $28,000 per student. The average is $22,000 per student, and then Corvallis is sitting at just over $25,000 per student, and that's largely thanks to our local option levy, and large gratitude to our community for continuing to support that. Next, we will look at our certified group. So the lowest comparator has 15.33 students per 1 FTE. Highest comparison, 20.28 students per FTE. The average is 18.31, and Corvallis is sitting at 17.77 students per 1 certified FTE. We also looked at average salary of those positions. So I want to explain my methodology here, because when we look at this for bargaining, we would actually, look at their actual full salary schedule, look at the different educational ranges. For this purpose, all I did was take the total dollars spent on certified employees, divide it by the number of FTE, okay? So the average salary lowest was at 69,000. The highest comparator was at 90,000. The average being around 82,000, and then Corvallis sitting there at 84, just over 84,000. So we are above the average on that.
Lauren, real quick, for people that don't know the difference between certified and classified that might be watching, can you let them, and also does the salary include benefits?
Yeah. Okay. So our certified are largely our teaching staff, our licensed teachers. Our classified is a wide array of group. So that's our educational assistants, it's our food service staff, it's our custodial staff, our technology staff, our some of my business staff are in that category. It's your front office staff. So it's lots of different skills live within that classified group. And so those two each one of these has a separate bargaining agreement. And then our admin managerial are what we call our non-represented group, because they are not a unionized group. And that also includes a wide array of different type of staff. And no, this does not include benefits. It's just straight salary cost. It doesn't include payroll expenses either, because that's all a dollar amount. If we are certified, for us, with all of those things wrapped up, costs about $141,000 per FTE on average with all of those things. But this is just looking at straight salary. Okay, so then in our classified group, the lowest comparator was 14.78 students per FTE. The highest was 27.54 students per FTE. Average was about 21.55, and we are sitting at 18, just a little over 18 students per FTE. I also want to say in the classified category, it's a lot harder to compare because, for example, some school districts contract out food service. We have food service in-house. We contract out transportation and bus drivers, whereas other districts, that's in-house. So the classified, I wouldn't get too hung up on the student per FTE there, because custodial is another one, and generally those are large groups of staff, and so depending on if they contract out or not, those numbers are going to look really different. And then again, average salary, you can see that there, and that is 32,000 for the lowest, 48 on the highest. The average is 40,000, and then we're at 41,000, just above that average. That's
and again, that FTE is the whole. You just did a division. You just did a division.
Simple math on that one. But it is, the classified again is more tricky because whereas, like if you look at a classified salary schedule, it's sort of by job categories, and those correlate to the pay ranges, and so depending on those other factors that we talked about, so that number is a little tricky, but I think for these purposes it's consistent data that we can compare. And then we get to the admin. So the lowest comparator has 96 students per FTE. The highest comparator has 198 students per FTE. The average is 155, and Corvallis is at 128 students per FTE. Then on average salary, using the same methodology, the lowest comparator was 80,000 per FTE. The highest comparator was 149, the average was 118, and Corvallis is just above that average at 122. I also want to mention that most people in that category work more days than not necessarily than classified, but definitely more than certified. So our certified group, their contract is for 191 days. So I did not adjust this for calendar days because everybody has different calendars, and that would just put another kind of wrench. But I want you to just have that for context when you're reading through this information. Most people in the admin managerial are on either probably 230 or 260. Can I get a thumbs up, Jennifer? Okay, thank you. And then classified is all over the board. I think the lowest is around like the 180, and then the highest again is 260. And that just depends on what their job function is, right? So that's just some information to have there. So then I was looking through this information, I found some interesting correlations. I'm not going to say it's causation, and we have a lot of smart people in this room that could take that further if they want to. But what I saw and kind of led me down this whole rabbit hole. I kept popping into Ryan's office all the time being like, what about this? What about this? But what I saw is, this is not probably not shocking, but districts who had the most dollars per student, budget dollars to spend per student, had the highest academic success metrics. Those districts all happen to be districts that have a local option levy, which helps them get to that higher dollar spend per student. And we also found that those districts were the ones that had the lower FTE per student ratios and have higher academic success. So I decided to do the same thing with academic success metrics using the state reported information on the state report cards, because that was easily accessible. So I took that information and you can see the lowest comparators for regular attender, 59%, the highest was 81, the average was 69, and Corvallis is at 70%. Can you tell me what regular attender, what that qualifies as? Just
a regular attender is a student who has attended 90% or more school days.
Thank you. And then our the ELA metric is based on third grade. And so the lowest comparator, 31%, the highest comparator at 74, the average at 48, and then we are at 51. And then math is 8th grade math, and the lowest comparator at 11%, the highest at 62, the average at 34, and we are at 42%. 9th grade.
Sorry, Lauren, but what does 8th grade math mean? Are these people that are, those numbers, people that are successfully completing 8th grade math or are enrolled in 8th grade math compared to taking algebra in 8th grade? What's
It's based on the
percentage mean?
The state testing. Okay. Yeah, this is all of the state metrics that they use. Okay, where am I at? 9th grade on track, 78% on the lowest, 95 on the highest. The average comparison was 88, and we are at 88. On track graduation, which means diploma in 4 years. Yes. That does not include GED. Okay. Lowest is 80%, highest is 97%, average is 89, and we are at 88. And then 5-year completer does include GED numbers, and the lowest was at 86, the highest at 98, the average at 93, and we are at 94%. So I will let people deduct what they want to from this information, but I committed to pulling it together, and so this is that information here. So anything, questions on that? Okay.
Actually, Lauren,
Yeah.
you said the question that prompted it was like if we have more more administrative staff, or was it more administrative cost? I couldn't remember.
It was both, that we have the
Okay.
highest paid administrators in the state of Oregon, and that we have the most administrators in the state of Oregon. I will say that one example that was used that we were constantly compared to was Salem-Keizer. We don't use Salem-Keizer as a comparator for anything else, and I did specifically reach out to them to talk through this, and based on how they do their budget. They don't actually allocate FTE in their grant funds. And so it made it impossible to compare the data sets because I was looking at full budgeted FTE in an entire budget, and we also just don't compare to them for anything else either. We don't have any similarities to them based on demographic size, like total size of a district, or academic performance, anything. So I didn't find that necessarily to be a comparator to use. So I went with our group that we use for bargaining, which is a group that for bargaining our associations also recognize as our comparator groups.
Thank you. I think that's helpful for people to know, like, why it's not always helpful to compare with districts that are way different than ours when it comes to how the funding plays out and where it comes from and stuff like that. So I appreciate how you pulled it together, especially using it with how we do things for bargaining, because it's really like on track with all the other pieces.
Okay. I guess one thing I would add to that is through the bargaining process, and when we work with our associations, we always try to make sure that our salaries are really competitive, and we try to stay above the average. And so I think these numbers show that, and I think this is in alignment with what we said we've been up to.
I have two questions. And one question is, which year is this summary table based on?
Yeah. So I think I got overwhelmed when I made this slide and there was too much stuff on it, because the full report cites all the different data sources for it. So I'll send you that tomorrow. So the budget, the salary, student information is based on the most recent state report that was available at that time, which I think was from March 5th. So that would be the student number that I used. The salary and FTE information is all from current year. And then the academic success metrics are all from 23-24, because those get published like a year after the fact. And it's all on the sheet that the full report, like this, I just copied the table, apparently. I don't even remember doing that, so
Okay, yeah,
sorry.
thank you. One more question, and how do I understand the percentage number for ELA and math? Math is for the average score of the school district, or the passing rate of the subject across the school district?
It's students who have met or exceeded the standard. That is the percentage of students who have met or exceeded the standard in the English language arts.
Then what's the succeeded standard?
What is the standard?
Yeah.
That's scored on a 1 through 4, and I think it's 3s and 4s.
It's based, like, we don't make what is the standard. This, yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
It's a state exam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, see me.
Lauren, just in case if it is in one of the tabs while you're doing this, have you seen any correlation between retention or any metric that may indicate retention between, like, how Corvallis compare in its retention to its staff to others, and how that may have any correlation with the outcomes?
Well, that is a research project that I have not started, but I would say, I mean, it would be hard from these data sources to interpret that information. There's other things, I think, that pieces of information about staff retention that Jennifer have that may be valuable to answer that question. But we know that we have a fairly high retention rate of staff. I am not in the position to correlate that to student outcomes, but it's definitely something like that we could that could be addressed or looked into. But I don't know if that's really my alley of expertise.
Thank you.
All right, so now's the time. We have been asking questions, but if there's anything that wasn't discussed, or other questions that come up for you, or other pieces of information that you would like to have. So for the people who are new, to just think about the next step. So at this point, I cannot give you any specific appropriations First of all, it's not done. We're working on it and we're real close. I'm hoping to finish up tomorrow. But I can't give you any specifics on anything like that yet based on this type of meeting. But at the next meeting, you will have had the document. We will go into detail about what our plan is, like, and kind of put some more information to the dollars to explain like what our strategic plan is for next year and all of that. And then there will be deliberation, and then you can approve the budget at the first meeting if you would like to. You are more than welcome to do that. And if there are underlying questions still at that point, you can ask more questions, and if I can't answer them, I can come back to you with them the following week and we can meet again. So that's kind of the process. So my hope is, like, my goal this year was to try to give you more information up front. So I've attempted to do that through this presentation, through our feedback survey report, through the budget FAQ, and then meeting with all of our new members one-on-one. But if there's anything else other than the actual details of the document that would be helpful for you to have or to know going into that process, and looking forward to, what would you need to be able to adopt or approve the budget, that would be great to know now so that I could have that for you and be ready with it.
And for the record, for the newbies and the 5 years that
I'm trying to think of what the what that looks like. There's pages in the back that have staffing information, which obviously correlates to $1, but I don't believe there's any tables that show a specific breakdown per school. And the reason for that is there's a lot of things that I guess technically we could capture if we did our accounting that way, but I would probably need at least 3 or 4 more staff to be able to do that. So for example, most of our curriculum and supply purchases are done at like a high level, and then so just billed to the district, right? Or our mental health staff, they're all like billed to the district, but they're actually in schools. But what that looks like is dependent upon what students show up and how they show up in the fall. We have a lot of staff like that, and also think like food service staff, custodial staff, technology staff, all staff like that are in schools and supporting it, but it's a district level program, so we don't break it out in that way. We do put in the calculations to show discretionary funding for schools, although that's a small amount. I think our smallest amount is, Bridges at $12,000, but then all the way up to our high schools, which have a few $100,000 in discretionary funds. But so it just depends on the size of the school and how they get those allocations. So the answer would be no, and there's not a great way to break it out because that's not how we do all of our accounting. It would be very time consuming to do it that way.
In looking over some of the data that
I think you need to turn
Okay, sorry. Don't know this. In looking at some of the historical data that I pulled off the internet today, I was looking at the individual schools. In particular, that struck me were the elementary schools. And out of the 6 or 7 that are there, one of them had noticeably lower scores on math and language arts and whatever the third, science.
Yeah.
Is there a way that the board or someone tracks what is the problem at that particular school and doesn't need to be addressed with a different additional funding to that school?
So well, I know the school you're talking about specifically, but all of our title schools, for example, receive additional allocation, and that is one of them, on top of just their base funding, because they qualify as a Title I school. So then they would receive additional funding on that. I can tell you that it's not about a dollar allocation, and we have students at particular schools that are just navigating different challenges, and that may manifest in how they can perform on a state test. I don't know if you guys want to say anything else about that, but
one of the other things, considerations, is that in a couple of our elementary schools, kids are learning in both English and Spanish. And so while they're acquiring those skills, we know that it takes longer for them to pass the state English reading test, because the majority of their day is spent in Spanish. And so that's a consideration we make as we look at those numbers, and a piece of understanding that we have.
Thanks a lot for the FAQ page. That was helpful for me to get caught up on this year's process. But I forgot the answer to the question about the swim pool and how that's going to impact budget. I think there's nothing known yet. Is that?
that's correct. So just to be clear, we own the pool. We have not operated it for several years. We've had an agreement with the city to do that. We are currently going through a facilities assessment of Osborne Aquatic Center to look at what it would take to bring it up to the level of operation that we need it to be at. We anticipate that to be multiple millions of dollars. We have done several things, and I'm saying we, not just as Corvallis School District, but there's a large group from the city, from the county, from the Benton Community Foundation, from Corvallis Public Schools Foundation, from CAT. Is that all the groups? I think. Yeah. So we've all. Oh, and Oregon Swim too. We've all been working together on a plan for that. At this time, we don't have the information on the assessment. I actually just signed the contract to get that work going. We had to go through a formal process, being public procurement, and we just executed that yesterday, I think. And so they will be doing that assessment. We also have had support from local legislators. So Sarah Gelser-Bluen, she has put in a request at the legislative level for $5 million to help go to the pool based on the impact that it has, not just on the Corvallis community. I had no idea, but after listening to Kat and Oregon Swim, just the impact that pool actually has on the entire West Coast for the swim community. And then there's also business implications for that as well, in the town of Corvallis, and businesses that gain revenue for having those teams come in. So there's a lot of people working on it. As far as a budget implication, it's not something that we can prioritize over our students and classroom teachers and all of those things, but we're going to do the best we can to be collaborative partners to figure out how to get that money. And we actually, for many years, have funded the operations and helped subsidize it, because that program at the city level runs in the red. And so we have given them $100,000 each year to support the operations. We also, obviously our swim teams use that facility, and there's a lot of things. I wouldn't say it does not carry the program whatsoever, but we have contributed that. So that will be continued to be included in the budget, and then we'll just see where that whole process lands. Miss anything?
No, I think, really we'll have more information by June as the session ends and we get the report from the architects.
Will the budget document include anything, any new contracts or existing contracts that need to be rebid this upcoming cycle?
Well, the dollar amount will be represented there, but that doesn't mean we have contracts in place. We know what things we may need to go out. You're talking about for like goods and services, not for employees, correct?
Goods and services, transportation, etc.
Yeah, most of the big ones are on multi-year contracts. We don't have anything like transportation is probably our biggest one, and it's not up at this point. So, like the dollar amounts for things will be represented within the budget, but I don't have to have like an approved contract to actually put it in the budget, if that makes sense. It's more of a placeholder, and then we go through that process multiple times per week, because our threshold of that sort of initiates that process is only $25,000, and it's real difficult to buy anything for less than $25,000 for a operation of our size.
And then also with our associations, we will have negotiations next year with our teachers, but that wouldn't go into effect till July 1 the following year.
Yeah. And historically, that is a multi-year contract as well. So that's why we actually don't have any this year, which is great. It's like one less thing to not have to assume in the budget. So.
I want to build on the question and the answer on the swimming pool. So to summarize, there is a huge amount of investments needed that we're pursuing to bring the pool back to where it needs to be, and it's really a huge magnitude beyond our budget or the city's budget. Also, there's continual of allocation in the Corvallis School District budget regarding what we used to pay as a partnership with the city in terms of supporting their operation and supporting their capital improvement. I have a city budget question that's relevant for us to continue doing this, and I'm wondering if that could be a request for us, from us to our partners as they navigate the city budget for the next year. Are they also going to continue to allocate their capital for the operation of the swimming pool? And I know you can't answer it because that's their proposed budget, but is relevant for me as I navigate. Are we going to continue sharing the responsibility with them moving forward? Are they having that responsibility as well for next year?
So in practical terms, the things I can share right now, one is that they are in the midst of doing a roof assessment. So they started that right after the closure. So they're still anticipating paying for that aspect. Also, the shoring that is currently in the building has a monthly rental fee, and the city is paying for that as well. So they are still contributing as we try to move forward together. Is that, and though that's not the technical answer you wanted, but that's the practical answer. Mm-hmm. Does that meet your request, or do you want us to delve deeper into the long-term investment in organizational planning, budgeting around that?
Yes and yes. This is really reassuring that their partnership is there for now for this cycle, but to really reassure our mutual constituents, I would like to have an answer. Are they intending to propose and approve a budget next year to continue what they have been doing moving forward? So I would say yes, I would like to see an indication. What's their plans? Are they going to continue what they're doing right now?
We'll ask the question.
Thank you.
I have a question about the increase, the 2.6. I forgot what that was, what the letters were next to it.
Consumer price index.
Yeah, thank you. Is that enough of an estimate for our economy right now?
There's some months where we have a negative CPI, and then there's some months where we have an 8% CPI. So what I'm doing is looking at specifically the West region, and then taking an average over the last 12 months. And I think it's tight, but I think it'll work.
Okay.
If I feel confident, does that make you feel confident? No,
I will feel hopeful with that
Okay.
because
Yeah.
it is a legitimate concern with the prices of things because we've
Yeah.
seen them go up some years, and even like seeing how it's like certain circumstances impacted the bond project, for example, with their materials, and they had to make adjustments, and that was like a short amount of time during the pandemic when that happened, when that impacted those prices. And so if we're having a short amount of time impact on the economy, I do worry about how that could impact next year's prices, but because they don't go down as fast as they go up.
Correct.
And so that was kind of where that question was coming from.
Yeah.
But if you feel good about it, we trust you.
don't-
But yeah.
I don't have a crystal ball that is going to tell me, and so I really like to base assumptions on data, and so I would say that's the data that I have available at this time, and that's what the budget will be built off of.
Okay.
It's something that obviously we have to keep an eye on, and we do. I think one of the things is just how we operate. The nature of our business is largely staffing, right? And those things are locked in because those are impacted by the contracts that we have already negotiated and settled on. So that's something that makes me feel like that's a bit safer. If you break down, I did an overall CPI for all goods and services in the region. And if you look at some of those, interestingly, one of our next biggest categories is utilities, and utilities actually has a negative CPI. And so that, coupled with some of the higher ones like food, I think as an overall average, I feel confident in that number. But
Okay.
I'm happy to
Thank
look
you.
at other scenarios if you would like.
And then are you going to talk about the federal part in our next meeting?
Correct. Yeah. Most of our federal funds, over $10 million, lives in the special revenues fund. So it's not directly impactful to our general fund, but it is, because if we are looking at programs and investments that are proven to work for kids, some of those are being funded by those dollars, and we are going to have to decide, like, are we going to prioritize that over something else in general fund, because that we have the data to show that that program is working, and just because those dollars go away doesn't mean we can stop supporting those kids. And so we don't really have a lot of answers on that. We've been told to plan for reductions in those funds. We also know, I think I mentioned it at the community meeting, but a bigger kind of consideration is to think about what happens to other federal programs in the state. And so if the state does the same thing that we're talking about redirecting resources to fund, backfill those federal programs, they're not going to be able to allocate as much funding directly to us. So one of those programs, specifically being Medicaid, that could be pretty impactful. And we know that that is a large group of our students that are receiving services and support through that program. So now what happens if they lose that support? And I think, Ryan has said this before, is like our schools are really a hub, and kids come here and we try to fulfill every need that they have. And so if they're not getting those for other programs, that's generally we're the last people at the table that do that support for students and families. So it's going to be impactful. To what extent, we don't know.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm just a little bit concerned about that, just seeing how it's panning out across the board, and how that could impact public education as well. Because I appreciate you pointing out that it may not show up exactly in something that's in our budget, but it could impact the state budget, which relies heavily on it. So I think that's important for people to know, like, those complexities as we're talking about the budget. And I really appreciate you looking at those nuances, Lauren, and trying to do your best with what we have right now.
Yeah.
So thank you.
We are working on an assumption that we will, just one of the assumptions is receive 25% less in our largest grants, and so the budget reflects that. If we receive additional dollars, then obviously we will deploy them as we get that information. I think one of the big ones that I'm concerned about is food service, because it's something that's often overlooked. I think it's just one of those, it's kind of like custodial, like those employees are doing a huge job every single day to support kids, make sure the buildings are ready. But a lot of people don't see that work, and I think the food service program is somewhat similar in that way. Like, you show up to school and there's breakfast and there's lunch and there's supper, and that's just the normal operations. That program is very expensive, and if our federal reimbursement dollars are decreased, that means that now we need to subsidize that program heavier with general fund dollars, because kids not eating isn't a choice. So that's probably the one that I would say keeps me up the most at night, trying to figure out how we would support that in a different way.
That's why I asked the question about the CPI too, because of knowing like the buses, that's on a contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's on a contract, other things are on contracts,
Yeah.
but things like the food one, just seeing the prices in general. And so that's where, and then if we have a
Yeah.
decrease of federal funds, so I'm glad you're like building some of that in.
Mhm.
And I hope you can
We'll
sleep tonight
talk
after we
about-
talk about this.
It's okay. I won't sleep until June. We will have assumptions built in for federal funding, and sort of something that will look different than what you maybe have seen in the past because of that. And so that will be a whole section, a presentation next time.
Thank you. It's pretty heartbreaking we're even having this conversation, honestly.
Just one thing to add to that, to keep in mind is that at the state level, there is a education sustainability fund that's very hard to access. It takes a number of criteria and thresholds and action to access those funds. But I anticipate that if we are in a situation where federal dollars are dramatically reduced, the legislature will be having that conversation. So that conversation will be beyond just CSD and our budget process. It will be a topic and a decision that will come from Salem.
And to piggyback on that, if that does happen, and that's great, we will probably have some challenges to navigate with cash flow based on the all of the hoops that would have to be jumped through in order to make that happen. And so that's something that we also have to consider throughout our financial planning. And because of things being so uncertain, I can tell you that, like our investments, we're not going to invest as much money next year, most likely, because we will need to be able to have quicker access to cash, because if our grants just get blocked at the state level, then even if we think that they may get unblocked at a certain point in time, I still have to pay all of our, almost 900 employees. So there's just like other implications that I think you can go so far down the road, I think, with how the ripple effect of all of these things. And I will say that I do feel grateful that we are in a position where we can invest some funds, because we do get over $1 million return on that, which then we can directly put back into programs. So I don't want to take it for granted that we can make investments, but that will be impacted because we have to have cash.
Yeah, I have one question here. Well, I know the school district might have the challenge about the falling number of the enrollments in the next few years, and it would bring in the gap, like the budget, right? The budget and the available funding. So I just read the slide. It says the school district prioritize the class size over other things. So I'm just wondering if I can have some examples, if there is, budget gap or insufficient budget for the school district. How does school district prioritize the class size over other things? Can you just give examples for explaining?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Every year we do a projection for enrollment, and then we take and it's by school and by grade, and then we take our class size target, and I'm summarizing this, so making it a little more simple than the actual process, but then we just divide the number of kids by that class size target, and we get the number of classroom teachers. And so we have kept our class size target fairly, I don't have the year off the top of my head, but it's been fairly stable. We actually are, I think, still lower than what we were probably 5 years ago. And so, but as you have less kids, using that formula, you need less classroom teachers to teach less kids. So in a way, what that looks like as far as a prioritization is not drastically increasing our class size target. So we could have said, say your class size target was 20 this year, and then I come to you and say, well, now our class size target is 30. I would say that's a pretty drastic change from a class size target of 20 to 30. And so that would be an example of not prioritizing class size because we increased it by such a large amount. So that's sort of how that plays out in a budget perspective. So by prioritizing class size, it still will mean less certified classroom teachers because there are less students to teach. But the actual average size of each classroom stays relatively the same. And again, it's class size average, so sometimes that looks different depending on the class. Does that answer your question? Okay. Chris?
When you are presenting at their next meeting, will you be talking about our serving lunch and breakfast over the summer? And how will that be funded?
I wasn't planning to, but summer food service program actually based again on standard operating. Summer food service program actually generates revenue for the food service fund. We will still be serving food to our families, and those in the summertime, just as a plug for that. It is all kids up to 18 years old, so even elementary kids can eat for free, and there will be several stations throughout the city for people to pick up free meals.
So there's no risk of losing that this summer?
I think that probably everything's at risk right now. Unfortunately, I mean, I can't say no.
Okay.
I can tell you that we are planning to run a summer food service program. We're going to feed kids this summer.
So last summer we had 11 sites, and for the summer we served almost 7,000 breakfasts, 23,000. Dang it, I hit it with my hand. 23,000 lunches, and then a handful of suppers as well. So just kind of to have the sense of that.
Yeah, and they're strategically placed throughout the community. So you don't necessarily have to have a car to get there. We place them outside of places that people might be going, like generally Osborne, because people are going there for the pool. So things like that. That program is we're still going to run that this summer. I'm going to hope we get the revenue for it.
And about 4,000 suppers.
Yeah.
So about 35,000 meals in all.
Okay. Yep.
So thank you for the budget parameters. It seems to be really helpful for me in terms of what the analysis will be when we receive the budget, and it's very clearly laid out how it rolls up the board goals into it. So I'm wondering if the executive summary that we'll receive will be laid out with this similar language, so that as we're looking at the budget document, we can reflect back on this and be like, yes, we are following these parameters.
So I will say yes, and we have not typically presented the budget in categories in which align necessarily to the board goals. And so that's something that I have started working on to implement this year. I intend to put that into the document, but I will not be able, like my end goal in my head is that every single dollar will be attached to the board goals, not necessarily the budget parameters, but the board goals, which are based on budget parameters. And so that is my goal. Will that be in this budget? No, but I'm going to start that process, and it'll probably more look like a narrative versus having every single dollar accounted for, because I'm just not there yet. We implemented like a new thing this year where when departments and principals submitted their budgets, I kindly forced them to align every single expenditure in their budgets to one of the goals. And so that's the direction we're moving. We don't have a system set up that can do that. We are implementing a budget software next year. We're switching out our old one for this, and so it actually has the capability to do that. And so look for that in the 26-27 budget document, but I'll start, because I think that's important. Like, how are you showing that what you're doing is actually what you're putting your dollars towards? Yeah.
Lauren, I want to go back to the CPI question. I want you to help us out, just understand that there's so much uncertainty, and we do what we can. We make the decisions with what we have, and the number was somewhere between 2.5, 2.6 CPI, and it appears to be really reasonable with the available. I want us to really understand why is it important to be. I want us to really understand why is it important to be exactly at the sweet spot where we think it is more likely to be, instead of overestimating or underestimating. So I'll try to describe what I think it is, and help me out if that's accurate. If we go and say on the extreme, we say we're going to just be cautious and assume 1.0, the inflation, that means it is very likely we're underestimating inflation, and we will have a budget, and that budget will not catch up with the actual inflation, and we're not going to be able to afford what we're hoping we're budgeting for. That's one extreme. The other extreme, let's say if we assume that a CPI is 3 or 4, if we do that, we will be overly cautious, and we will be saying we're putting money to buy things, and we think they're gonna be so expensive, but they don't end up being there, and now we're wasting resources not being spent on other stuff. So you'll be not spending money for everything we need. So that's where we need to be really exactly at the middle point, not overestimating or underestimating. Is that correct, or could you help me out to correct me?
Yes, and I think part of it too is if you ask me if I would like to have a larger buffer there, and that would mean that more impact to our schools next year. And so while it makes me uncomfortable, I think it's reasonable. And as I mentioned earlier, as staffing being the largest part of our budget, those numbers are pretty solid. Like, I feel confident about that. And if we go into a situation where we're tracking and we're way over on expenditures, then we can course correct, because that number is actually a bit smaller than our staffing. And so there is things that I can implement. We've done spending freezes in the past. We've done hiring freezes. We've done many different strategies to save money. And I can tell you what I've seen over the last few years is when we need to be in that situation, we do a really good job of pivoting very quickly and making up any deficit from those unknowns. So I understand why you guys are concerned, and well, maybe we'll know in like a year. You could say you're crazy and you were wrong. But I still feel confident in that approach to it, because I think if I was as cautious as I would want to be, the impact would be too great on our schools, and trying to balance all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well said.
Bernie?
Yeah, so I think for the certified employees and also classified employees, their contract builds in 4% and 5% COLA, right?
Correct.
So
Plus
they
a
are
step.
pretty safe in any price fluctuation. We wouldn't be changing that for them.
No.
So the personnel cost is going to be pretty much the same as you mentioned. So the wild card is this.
That's like under normal circumstances, not where we don't know if the Department of Education is actually going to go away with all the title funding. And so that's why I asked those questions. And so I get where you're coming from. Hopefully it does not actually get dissolved and we have those critical services. But I just wanted to mention that too. So I see why you're nervous. And I appreciate you pointing out that if we did more, the impacts would be a lot. Yeah, so thank you.
I promise I will go into my safety net plans at the meeting. I have them.
One question or just one thought about the parameter here.
Sure.
And I'm very thankful to have a chance to read through these parameters. I understand that this can be regarded as a guideline for committee members to make the budget decision, right? But here I'm just I just have some thought about the student-centered decisions. I know this already adopted and passed by the school board, but regarding the words, here I don't know how to understand adults. If my understanding is adults can be understood as parents or just the adult stakeholders across the school district, because here the paragraph says actually the relationship between the students and adults are mutually exclusive. It's like their their interests are mutually exclusive. But my understanding here, the adults shouldn't exclude the parents, because in my personal experience, and when my daughter was at 7th grader, and she received the introduction about instruction about how to pick up the 8th grade math. The school just gives them guideline whether they should choose the 8th grade or choose algebra 1. So let the students make a decision first, and they have their choice. After that, the school just sent parents a link to do a survey to see how parents think about their kids' possible achievement regarding the 8th grade. So, and also regarding my daughter, my older one is a rising 9th grader, and she will attend CVHS. And so, as the first step, and she received a catalog to pick up on the classes that she is interested in, and then the school got the data, and after that, the school sent me a link about his choice, and as parents to have their inputs. So from my personal experience, I think, here, parents are adults, and their interest rates might not sound like where their interests are mutually exclusive. So I don't, that is my thought about this paragraph. Yeah, thank you. Question. Thank you.
I would just, I was just gonna say, I would invite folk, if they had thoughts on the parameters, to do that when we do the meetings where we adopt them, to send in thoughts to the school board at that point, because I appreciate you sharing how it lands, and we're, like you said, they're already adopted, so that's what we're working with, and and I think that sometimes what I believe that this was getting at is sometimes we make decisions where we're like, I remember when I was in school, I think about that with my kids. I was like, I remember when I was in school, and then I was like, but that's not the experience of the students now. It's not like the 80s and so or in 90s. It's 2025, and so I think that's more the heart of what this is saying. It's not saying parents aren't important, because parents are actually thinking about the students too, right? And so I think that's kind of, from what I understand, from how I read it, how I read it as a board member. But I appreciate you pointing that out, and would that's something we should think about next year, how it's worded, so it doesn't land that way for parents. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does anybody have any more questions for Lauren? I think it's back to my turn on the agenda. It is. So the next meeting is on Thursday, May 15th. And at that time, we will be electing the committee chair and vice chair of the budget committee. And we will receive the superintendent's budget message. We'll receive public testimony, which I am sure we will have. So, and then we will deliberate, and if time, approve the budget. As been mentioned, we have not done that since I've been on the board. We may do that, you never know. And it would be also the tax rate and tax amount. And I just wanted to say again to thank you all for being on the budget committee along with us. It's really important. As you've been hearing, public education in 2025 is not even what it looked like in 2024. And or the year before that, and it changes every year. And so I appreciate you all taking the time to learn more about how the budget's put together this evening, and what all to consider when we meet next, and thinking of the best interest of the students in our community. So I wanted to say thank you again before we adjourn, and with that we are adjourned at 8:16 p.m. Have a good night, everyone.